Hey everybody, welcome. So I want to make a video talking about this little new item that I got. This is the Flextail Gear Max Shower. Well, originally wasn't called the Max. They only call it the Max now because when they first originally threw this out, this was just the Flextail Shower. But they changed it to the Max because they had a Flextail Mini, which is called the Tiny. And so instead of just calling this the regular, they just said make it the Max. Yes, I've seen this before. It was called the Flextail Max. So this product isn't anything different than what it's been for years, in a sense. The newer version of this is the Flextail Tiny. It's basically smaller, and half the power, in a sense, of this version. Now, as for the complication of the information about that's thrown out through websites and whatnot, I would highly suggest looking at the manufacturer websites versus reading the information on the actual buy website, because the problem is, for the Tiny, for instance, it says it has a power performance of 4 to 4.5, no, 3.5 to 4 liters per minute. And everybody's going, oh man, that's actually pretty freaking good for a tiny thing. Or 4.5 to 5 liters on max, the higher mode, for the Tiny. And this supposedly is like, I think 7 liters per minute or something like that. That's actually incorrect. Both of those are actually incorrect. This, on the start mode, only pumps out 2.2 liters per minute. The second mode, aka the faster mode, pushes out 3.0 liters per minute for the Max or the normal version. The Tiny only performs 1.4 liters per minute and 2.5 liters per minute on the higher setting. So it's weaker than this by far. Now, how does it still spray pretty well is mainly the design of the tube system and also the shower head system, which is still quite unique, and the motor system is probably pretty decent too, because it gives it that pressure to be able to perform that throw out, which is actually pretty nice. Because these little tiny units are having to push from ground level all the way up to 7.2 foot height, and then throw out that maximum distance across the board. So people think that, oh yeah, they put in a bucket, they for instance, here's my hand in water, and here's the shower head. Oh yeah, it goes pretty far. It's actually pretty decent. That's not how you use them. This is at level, this is pretty much within, like, I don't know, 5 inches away or so forth from the distance of height from 2 points of such forth. Yeah, it's gonna be powerful at that level. Duh! This is supposed to be on the ground, basically where your feet are. And this, the shower piece, is supposed to be another foot or so forth over your head. Then you test the distance. That's the big difference between such forth. So yeah. So both of these are pretty nice. And funny thing that I found is these have a slow startup system. And I'm going to turn this on, but I'm not going to leave it on for a long time. You can run these a bit. The reason why you don't want to run these is because the difference between running a motor on its own and not on its own of a watered motor and a non-watered motor is heat distribution. See, a watered motor is a concealed system. It gets its cooling system by either the water flowing through it, contacting through around the motor system by a chilled heatsink system. Like for instance, boats will have their motors covered with a pump system that regulates through the seawater through around the motor to keep the motors cool while they're, and the cooling of the metal rod of the motor that spins the propellers also helps chill down the metal magnetic rotor system. That's the same thing here, is that it's basically sucking in the water and chilling the metal of the motor top and the rotor to chill the motor as it spins. There's no fans, fins, or anything to keep this motor cool during the system. It can run like this. It can run air, but for how long? That's the piece that gets the problem. Because the longer it runs, the more heat up it does, especially when it has a resistance. For instance, if I put my finger on the spinner and just let the motor run, that resistance causes more heat up because it's trying to push the rotor around, and basically having a stator rotor still and the magnetic field going across causes the magnetic field to basically heat up the stator rotor. That's not good. And then the residual heat also spreads out to the stator and just causes that issue. So yes, it can actually run, these can actually run in air, but not for a long period of time because they need the cooling from sucking in the water. That's how they get from the tip of the rotor and the middle for head contact. But normal motors are basically the same, except some motors will have fins on the back to air vent through the metal casing of the motor housing itself. For instance, aircraft motors will actually tend to spin, like on RC planes and whatnot. They'll actually spin themselves to air cool themselves around by causing a vortex around the motor. As the propeller spins, the outside motor piece actually causes the spin too. So yeah, you learn a lot of things when you actually look into motor system. But what I found interesting about this is that it actually has a slow startup. So I'll show you guys here. So it goes, it doesn't just go when you turn it on. Some motors will just go, so that's actually pretty interesting that this has a slow start system to it before it gets to its maximum spin rate. So that's pretty neat. Now, the reason why I got the Max or normal version compared to the Tiny, which seems actually pretty cool with the shower head, but the biggest difference is I didn't know one thing that some some people probably can tell me later in the future, is if it actually has a grill like this, for instance, to stop impurities, or the grill is built into the plastic housing, because I think for the Tiny, this is actually thicker, and there's supposedly a metal grill within there to counteract stuff from getting on here. Because you're thinking that, oh, well, this already stops such and such. Well, yes and no. That's why there's this grill, and the reason why I'm holding my finger onto it is because it will drop off. Because this is actually just, you know, basically just sitting on top. So if you ever notice that this makes a kind of a rattle sound, is because that grill is just literally just floating on top. It's not glued in place or anything like that. So if you take this off and you put your hand over there, then the grill will literally just fall off. It's just a metal piece and that's it. And these little vents, they actually curve upwards and into the middle. They actually don't have their own suction points, so the metal grill is actually the whole entire suction area. I don't know about the Tiny about that, because there are the same kind of size for the Tiny, so who knows? Maybe there's also a bit of mesh around these areas for the Tiny. That's one thing that got me, that I wasn't really sure on getting for, but that wasn't a huge deal. The biggest one was battery life and also the water pressure. The water pressure is quite low, but it does make up for the fact that the shower head actually still performs quite a decent amount of range for such an amount of low amount of water usage. So it might actually have a lot more pressure to be able to perform quite far, but not use so much water. So that's quite different, which is interesting, because that's what the some other companies that aren't even real companies for that fact will base their pressure system based on how much liters per minute they have. A lot of showers actually have basically like the same number of holes for their shower heads compared to the others. They'll have like maybe a higher rate of flow rate, but it'll have the same kind of pressure like ability to it, but it just uses more water. So theoretically you think that it uses better pressure because more water usage means better pressure. That's not always the case. For instance, pressure washers actually don't even use that much water, but they have a huge amount of pressure. So it's a big difference. So there's your logic there, right there for that ability. So the shower head for the Tiny is actually quite unique, and so is the normal, for having that amount of pressure without so much water usage. But I was still hesitant, especially since the spread is more wider on the Tiny compared to the Max or normal. While the Max actually has a more focus wash ability, the Tiny, on the other hand, actually splits that like that. As you get farther, it goes farther open, and you can't change that. It's designed to be that way. But the plus for the Tiny is that the head cap can actually be unscrewed, and say if you have calcium buildup, you can just throw that plastic head into a bucket of vinegar or such forth, and it'll. But then again, you can also probably do the same thing with just throwing the head on top of vinegar with the Max, because that actually uses a steel head, but it might still be plus or minus. But yeah, and you can currently get replacement heads from Flextail for the Max version. The Tiny is still no ability whatsoever. So if you need replacements, you can't just literally buy a new hose or a new head for the Tiny at the moment. Maybe later in the future they'll probably do that, because they have their Tiny version bags being sold right now too, so they probably might have that come in the near future, which is going to be pretty cool. So like I said, this is the metal grill, and basically just comes off like that and sits. There's no magnets or anything how it sits or does like that. So yeah. But they're both still cool. The other reason why I didn't really want to get the Tiny versus the Max or the normal is because it has half the battery life. 35 minutes for maximum power performance and only 70 minutes for the low power requirements, which is okay in a sense, but I don't know. I would prefer more battery life, even if I'm using lower power ability. But if I was able to get the tiniest shower head for this size, that'd probably make both worlds in a sense. But I don't know if they really want that to go on. I mean, theoretically, somebody else can test that theory of how the pressure relates to the Tiny on the Max, the Tiny head shower piece for the Max, because they're using standard quick release abilities, so theoretically you can use pretty much any kind of quick release whatever do that you want. For instance, if you want to go hose your garden and whatnot, you can get your standard hose and literally just clip it on to this, which is actually kind of cool. But there's no other accessories you can buy from Flextail. But then again, you can buy other, quick release system from third-party systems and whatnot, and use it like that. But garden hose for 30 foot and something would probably be kind of and a bit slow, because you're pushing 7 foot and also having to push up to 7 foot of a distance upwards. So this is not pushing really far distance that way, it's pushing far distance up of gravity and then trying to push about 7 foot away. So maybe I'd say maybe about 15 feet of distance at maybe about a normal height of 3 to 4-ish foot. You could probably theoretically get a foot of spray or something like that with this unit at maximum power. Who knows? But either way, still pretty decent. But the battery life, I wanted more battery life. This gets 70 minutes of runtime on its maximum of 3.0 liters per minute, and 2.2 liters per minute gets about 120 minutes, so basically double. And both of them recharge through USB-C on the back port right here, so everybody's probably going to be jumping up and down. But the difference is that this actually charges faster. Everybody's probably going to be like, wait, what? The Tiny should charge faster. That's actually incorrect. The Tiny actually charges slower. And the reason being, these aren't actually full USB-Cs. See, a lot of people also don't understand another thing about USB-C ports, is that USB-C ports are they are universal, but a USB-C standard is a switch voltage technology, and normally they don't actually just work on one voltage. So for instance, your phone will charge up to like 45 watts, for instance. That's not charging at standard USB technology. That's charging at switch voltage technology. Switch voltage technology means that it basically goes from 5 volts, 9 volts, 12 volts, 15 volts, and ups the ampage as it goes up voltage. So for instance, 5 volts, 1 amp, 2 amps, 3 amps, 1 amp, 9 volts, 2 amps, 3 amps, 1 amp, 12 volts, and etc, etc, etc. That's what it's called switch voltage technology. So that's what a standard USB-C port is actually about. Old USB port system that is like from micro or mini USB ports or even a standard full-size USB port is actually called USB. It is on the standard 5-volt range, and the maximum voltage, the maximum ampage right now is currently, I think, 3 or 3.5. So yeah, you won't get any more farther than that in most cases. And 3 and above is more advanced kind of USB power ability. Or I think it's 4 amps, because I've seen one that was supporting 5 volts at 22 watts. So in the conversion wise, yeah, it's quite up there. But 5 volts at 3 amps is 15 watts. This only performs 10 watts. So it's 5 volts at 2 amps. The Tiny runs at 5 volts at 0.8 amps. So it's going to charge slower, and that's going to break it up an hour more. So this charges at 2.5 hours, and the Tiny only charges at 3.5 hours. 3.5 in total minutes or so forth. You want to, anyways, 3 hours and like 50 minutes or so forth, or 30 minutes. So yeah, it's around that roughly bit. So it does take a while more to charge the Tiny, even though it has half the battery capacity. This has about 16 watt hours, or no, 18 watt hours. So this has likely two 18650 cells in parallel, which equals such ability. And they are using 2500 mAh capacities, aka 2500 mAh. So 2 of those is such forth. So that's equaling to 5000 mAh capacity. The standard Tiny uses one single 18650 cell, or such forth, and it is running at 2500 mAh, or 2500 mAh capacity. So yeah, still pretty neat unit though, and probably the second best of what I've seen. Well, this is custom made full on, but the first showerhead one that I've seen that is an actual real company, unlike Flextail also, is from IronHammer. They're the only other company that I've seen literally have their own shower ability. Yes, IronHammer. Now, IronHammer or Iron Fist, whatever company they want to call themselves from their cellular ability, is not using USB ports itself. It is using USB standard, but it's using a DC jack barrel connection. So it's using a 3.5 millimeter uh, power port that is a barrel jack. It's not using USB-C or USB micro. It's using a barrel jack connector to make it smaller, which is more convenient and better proofing ability. And that charges around 2 amps also. Does charge from USB-A or so forth if you want to charge from any of those standards. So it does have its own like USB plug that has a barrel jack to a USB A port. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, that's a proprietary connector." No, it's not. No, it's not. A barrel jack is not proprietary. A barrel jack is a standard DC power port. It's pretty easy to get. I mean, a lot of devices, especially for like, Energizer 1 hour charger, or Duracell's 15-minute or 8 Ion 8000, those use barrel jacks. Or even for some electric bikes, they use the barrel jack, little tiny little circle thing. That's called a barrel jack. Easy to get. They're not proprietary. Same thing with friggin' Jackery or Gold Zero. Everybody thinks that that's a specific jack that is only for that company. No, it's not. Proprietary means that it's a unique plug specifically only from that company. Only that company has their power port built for that specific design. No other company out in the world has it, because they want it specifically only to be used for their product. That's it. That's what that term means. There you guys go. You learned another thing. Quite unique. So yeah, IronHammer is probably the only other company besides Flextail that actually has a true shower piece. And they actually have 4 liters per minute on their high setting and 3 liters per minute on their low setting, and they have it pretty well. Have their product, and you can look down below and see my other video, and their freaking thing blasts. I mean, it is amazing. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen other products out there on Amazon and such forth, and they have these cool things that look neat and whatnot, but they don't actually are real products. So you'll see the same product from other random companies. You'll think, oh, yeah, that's actually a pretty good one. And they'll probably buy that one, but then you find, like, a couple days later, you find through the website, oh, another one's down for, like, the same exact item, and it's $20 less. And you're like, I could have got that one instead. Or maybe 2 days later, and you could have seen that you found something even lower. You got ripped off. And the reason why is because they're no-name products. No-name products means that basically I can make up a random company out my butt crack, for instance, and buy that product, stamp my logo on top of that, and boom, I can resell it from my company. That's what no-name products mean. And that's what these products are. They have a random manufacturer. A random manufacturer basically sells these products to random companies They will now stamp their logo on top of it and then resell it to you. They don't build the product. They don't support the product. They don't have any tech support ability to it. They don't know anything about the product whatsoever besides the basic details that the manufacturer gives them. And then they just stamp that crap and make up some other random baloney and go, it's great. And for replacing the product, if they theoretically did, try and get it fixed, for instance, they'll sell it, they'll throw it to a random repair company for like super pissing cheap and then ship it back to you when it supposedly would be fixed. Or most of these companies just basically say, oh, well, here's a replacement, and just kind of, wish-wash you to go away, to hush you up, in a sense. Because, they don't really give a darn. They just want this, the moolah. Sure, they do waste out in some of the free products that they give out, but then they're just like, makes you happy to show up, then, cool. But most of the products that I've seen out there are pretty much exactly like that. No name products. They'll change them per year or so forth to make them look better, look different, supposedly have better this and whatnot. But most of them, they're pretty generic. And a lot of them, from what I've seen in some videos, will also be in pretty bad locations. From some videos I've seen, they also, I saw some videos were talking that they got this product and it smelled like weirdness. I can't get into Pacific, but it basically has that like very weird smell, like, basically if you had like hot rubber, and not because it's transporting from such and such place, but something that stuck to the product that was in a location that stunk to high bologna beans, and it affected inside the product. So some of these locations might have that kind of issue with these kind of no-name products. Official products won't have that. And they likely won't have a lot of other problems either. So yeah. So the two official ones that I believe are true to the ability is this one and IronHammer. Any other one you want to find throughout the entire internet is probably going to just basically be a bland no-name product. Because I haven't seen anyone that actually is, really built from the ground up. Because, again, these no-name sellers don't actually build their product. They don't know anything. They just buy it from a random company that makes them that don't even have a company name and just resell them, and they just throw them like, hotcakes. They're just like, okay, you take it, you take that, you take this, you take that, blah, 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 blah. And they make profit like that. They have like a million other companies come to them, and they just throw them out like hotcakes. They don't care what they do with that after, as long as they get the moolah from the random product that they get bought, cool with that. But a real dedicated company actually makes their product, and they actually know about the design, how the product is, how this goes on, blah, blah, blah. Although Flextail, I'm a little iffy about how and why the information from off their website is lackluster. Because on their website, it actually tells you the correct information. But off the website, I don't get how the information didn't translate correctly. Like, how does the Tiny have 3.5 or 4 liters per minute on low setting and like 4.5 to 5 liters per minute on high setting? on Amazon's website. That's not correct. But yeah, pretty freaking crazy. And hopefully later in the future too, Flextail Gear will get the Tiny to actually have a cargo bag, because with the Max, normal or so forth, it does come with an organizer if you buy $10 more with the organizer. But if you just want the normal, then it doesn't come with the organizer bag. So yeah, it's pretty neat from both ends. But yeah, the only other shower I've seen that is actually there is IronHammer. And I'll link down below of both the products. And you guys can see that. It's the only two portable battery powered showers that are legit showers. Every other company out there are not legit, because you'll find the exact same item under different company names, and they'll just be pulling out random crap about, especially with the battery department ability. Like, some will say, oh, it has like 8,000 mAh capacity, and then the same product from a different company will say, oh, it's got like 10,000 mAh capacity. It's like, how's that making any sense? For instance, if you're getting 6,000 mAh, that's two 18650 cells in a single cylinder canister, right? Of 3,000 mAh capacity for each cell. How are you getting 10,000 mAh in the same design, same cellular system, when you can only maximum up to 3,500 mAh capacity? 3,500. And even then, that would still be only 7,000 mAh. So how are you fitting another 3,000 mAh capacity cell in the same canister design? See my point? Doesn't make sense. It's not possible. You would literally have to redesign the entire thing to make it bigger or so forth for 3 cells. And then why would you use 2 high cells and then 1 lower cell? That doesn't make any sense. That's why a lot of companies keep their batteries even with each other. For instance, IronHammer uses 2 2400 mAhs to equal 480 100 mAh, or I think it's 2 20s, 2 2200 mAhs to equal 4400 mAh. But yeah, that's how it works. So anyways, I'll see you guys later. Peace out, and, well, be chilly.